Yeah, I use it for now, as in right now. All right. Welcome to the Critical Christian Podcast. Welcome to the Critical Christian Podcast. We're your host, Dan.
Then everyone.
No, it's weird. It should, but yeah, it's weird.
Anyway, we're gonna date today.
Yeah, we'll have to speak real fast.
Feels
Nice.
longer.
It does. No, no, no. Ask what we read last week. No, ask what we read last week. You know what? That's a good question. As a recap, last week I wrote a
Oh, you wrote a
recap.
something
Yeah,
prepared.
yeah. Moses and Aaron were visiting the Pharaoh, asking to set their people free or whatever. And the Pharaoh said, LOL, no. Then the Jews got pissed at Moses. Then Moses got pissed at God. Also, they made bricks out of garbage straw or something. At the end, Moses was lamenting having to be God's mouthpiece, even though he sucks at public speaking, something I'm sure we can all relate to. And last week we discussed briefly how some scholar or whatever decided where chapters should be divided. So I guess he's to blame for the weird cutoff here.
Yeah, actually, as I was going through some of the Hebrew text for chapter 7 and 8, I found that whoever did the chapter and verse divisions in the Hebrew Bible separated it much better.
Oh,
There's a bunch of that you'll find when you read it in the original Greek and Hebrew. You'll discover that whoever, I don't know who was in charge of those, but they had sometimes better sense, and they're like, okay, this is a much more logical
no, the
chapter.
verses are the same though, right? The verses are not the same. Oh,
They're similar though.
yeah,
Like you can generally still get where you're going, just
yeah.
like a verse or two.
I know, but if you're like, ooh, John 3:16, and you put it on your eyelids or whatever,
But
and then it's like something weird.
yeah, I mean, you're never gonna if the verse number's off and you're trying to read it in a different language,
Yeah,
you might not actually find the NFL player might be leading you to the wrong verse.
that's right.
I mean, what if they're trying to teach you about the love of Jesus, but then the verse is actually saying something like, drag them in front of me and have them all executed, which is
Exactly.
part of one of Jesus' parables.
Well, there you
It's
go.
a good one.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyways, the long and short of it is there's the verse numbers in English are
yeah.
not universal and all.
That's crazy.
So should we jump into 7 and 8?
Was it Get Her Dune?
Right.
Sure.
Apparently the first verse.
Yeah,
How much do you want to read? You got it sectioned up in your notes, right?
yeah.
Want to read a paragraph at a time, or
No, no, no. Just a verse at a time, because I got stuff to talk about for all of
I
them.
figured as much. All right, go for it.
All right. The Lord said to Moses, "See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother shall be your prophet." So right away, I think we see that the first verse is a little odd. God made Moses like God to Pharaoh. I assume God just means he gave Moses a bunch of miracles that didn't impress anybody.
Yeah, basically.
And now Aaron is Moses' prophet. So, anyone want to tell me why God didn't just choose Aaron in the first place?
Really good point. And my thought on that is it would have to do with Moses's being raised as a prince in Egypt, and I guess probably having some level of status.
Mm-hmm.
All I can think.
Yeah, except nobody knew who he was
Well, that's the
anymore, right?
thing, because the pharaoh that wanted to execute him, the one who actually knew who he was, had to wait for him to die before back to Egypt.
Yeah,
So why does it even matter at that point?
I'm saying it doesn't.
And that's a good point, because the elders of the Hebrews, they didn't care for this Moses guy. They didn't know who he was, but they would have known who Aaron was. Aaron was there the whole time.
Yeah.
So Why wouldn't God just use Aaron?
I don't know.
Because God appointed Aaron to come out and help anyway.
Right.
But what do we need this Moses goof for?
I don't know. You tell me.
And we're gonna find out, that Moses
what?
and Aaron are together.
Like the whole thing?
The whole damn thing.
Yeah.
They're similar in age,
Yeah.
3 years apart. So it's like I couldn't use one.
Mhm.
Why do you need both?
Yep, it's a mystery.
You think Miriam, the sister, was the same sister that was there when Moses was born?
Yes.
I figured as much, but if that's the case, when we get to the point in Exodus, eventually we have to talk about how old she was when she passes away, because her death is recorded. So, and if she than Moses, I don't know, we'll say by 10 years. Curious to know if she lived longer than Moses, because Moses and Aaron both died at 120 on the money. And we read earlier that people weren't supposed to live past. And that's why the ages of the. So if it's the case that Miriam lived to,
yeah,
especially since now the ages have. Anyways, we'll get to that when we get to that. But you bring up a good point, Dan. I see no reason why God couldn't have just used Aaron. Aaron seems to be the guy that's got the skills.
Crazy.
It's a baffling thing. Maybe somebody in the comments on these videos point us to a good reason why Moses was needed at all.
I have a good feeling that we'll get a bunch of comments on this.
Yeah, there's probably a reason that we're.
Yeah. All right.
I had a good question, which is this seems to be a doublet. This happened already. Go to Exodus 4, verse 1 through 17. The whole thing already happened. Or Moses is like, "Hey, I don't speak so good," and then then God's like, "That's okay. So the Lord said to Moses, "See, I've made you like a god to Pharaoh, and he's going to speak for you and all that stuff." But that already happened in chapter 4.
Yeah.
So I think, as we've already mentioned in Genesis, Exodus, this has got to be it's got to be a sign that there are multiple narratives that are being stitched.
Yeah, I mentioned that in a different thing. So
I think the more we read the narrative, the more that just becomes painfully obvious. Like, this wouldn't be a coherent story. One guy just sat down and wrote the whole thing out.
You mean it would be a coherent story?
No, I mean, if somebody actually did that, they wouldn't come up with what we have.
Oh, yeah.
It would be more cohesive.
Right.
Well, with that, let's do verse number 2.
You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his land. Okay, so Moses says the stuff, and Aaron does the threatening. I don't know. Whatever.
It is interesting. We're gonna see some interactions back and forth between Aaron and Moses. Because it seems like they take turns doing things. Okay. But interestingly enough, he says, "Speak. But he shall speak all that I command you, brother Aaron. Shall tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of this." But that's interesting because, like, so far, like, it seems like God is not asking necessarily to go out of the land, just to go into the wilderness for 3 days. So I'm reluctant to think that God is telling them that he's going to let them completely go out of, like, you're free. I wonder if this is just like loose.
That we're just supposed to know.
Yeah, like we're just supposed to know that he means go out into the wilderness to sacrifice.
I mean, that's the only thing that would make sense. I mean, I didn't think of it, but yeah. Because it does really feel like they're talking about just getting out of there. And then they keep not getting out of there. Yeah.
Verse 3.
Sure. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and I will multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Oh no. Is this the beginning of another very long discussion on free will? Fine.
You know what it is.
Well, let's just get right to it then. Yeah, it would appear as though the Pharaoh was willing to let them all go, but God was like, nah, not enough people have suffered yet. Of course, the argument is just that God wanted a chance to show off how powerful he is, but a lot of people likely died needlessly. So it kind of makes you wonder how precious life actually is if you can get killed just to set an example. Yeah. What I got?
So I agree with you, and I think this is when we talk about the free will, like there's instances where like God is like he's intervening on people's free will to kind of orchestrate the history to come out a particular way.
Yeah.
And like when we read the Joseph narrative, you're kind of like, oh, well, that's a good thing because God's actually doing a good thing by sending Joseph ahead of him.
Right. Yeah.
Except that it makes it so that they're all slaves for 400 years.
Right. So it's not good.
Right. And then here he's interjecting on people's free will. And the end result is that the Egyptian firstborn are all going to be executed.
Mm-hmm.
But as we keep reading, it seems clear that Pharaoh does relent throughout the process a couple times.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've talked to you about it, but I've brought it up in other discussions. If remember, God knows all things.
Mm-hmm.
If Pharaoh was never going to soften his heart,
Mm-hmm.
he was only going to harden his heart the whole time. If that was the case, then I would see no reason why God would ever have to harden his heart. Right? So
right.
if God doesn't harden Pharaoh's heart,
Mm-hmm.
would the outcome be the same? Would all 10 plagues still happen before Pharaoh releases them?
No, of course not. We already know the answer to that.
Exactly, yeah. So God has to harden his heart, not because it's a necessary thing to let the people go, but because it's a necessary thing for him to, display how, powerful and mighty and wrathful and vengeful he is.
Right.
Right. And that can be a hard pill to swallow.
Oh, yes.
Right? Because you would expect that if God's going to intervene on somebody's free will, it would produce some sort of ultimate good.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find ultimate good in the slaughter of innocent children.
I would say.
Not to say that all the Egyptian firstborn were children. Obviously, some of them were.
You know what? I was thinking about that earlier, and I don't care.
I know it really doesn't matter if they were children or adults. It just.
Yeah.
But when it is children, it really, you feel it
right, yeah.
more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you came up and you hit me, smacked me in the face, I might be a little alarmed.
Mm-hmm.
But if you did it to my child,
it would probably die.
There would be very bad repercussions. Because children are defenseless.
Mm-hmm.
And they're innocent.
Yes.
They don't even know right from wrong yet. Anyways, anything else before we go to verse 4?
Nope.
All right, let's have it.
When Pharaoh does not listen to you, I will lay my hand upon Egypt and... Whoops. That was the chair, not me.
I'm sure it was.
Okay.
beans, and musical fruit. The more you eat, the more you toot.
The
more you toot, the better you feel. So you eat your beans at every meal.
Can we just edit this out somehow?
It's live. It's on the internet forever.
When Pharaoh does not listen to you, I will lay my hand upon Egypt and bring my people, the Israelites, company by company, out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. So eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
Right, eventually. So you think the Jews were protected against the effects of the plagues up to this point? Don't use your knowledge of future events, okay? Because when I wrote this, I write my questions, then I keep going. Otherwise, it's cheating.
Well, that's the thing, because some of the plagues, they make it very clear to Pharaoh when the plagues are about to happen. They say, well, this will happen only to you,
Right.
and not to the children of Israel, and then you will know that God makes a distinction between his people and your people. And so one would have to wonder, would that be true for all the plagues?
Yeah, for the ones they don't mention that.
Right, because like the first plague,
Yeah.
I already forgot. What was the first plague?
Blood water.
That's right. We're about to hear the blood water.
That would have to affect everybody. I think.
Yeah, how would that not affect the
I don't
Hebrews?
really know where the Nile River runs, but I assume it's around Goshen too. So that would definitely affect them.
It
So
runs vertical through the land.
there you go, vertical,
So
up and down.
as far as I can tell, and when we get there, it'll be more clear. As far as I can tell, when the waters turn to blood,
Mm-hmm.
all of the water.
Right. We'll get to that because that was a little like, what?
What would be a really good miracle is if he did the same thing he did with like the gnats, dead animals, where the water in Goshen didn't turn to blood, but the water everywhere else did, and then you can like see a divide
Yeah.
in the water where it was blood and water not mixing. That would have been cool. That'd be really convincing. That'd be a great trick.
Well, there's a good reason why he didn't do that.
Right.
And we'll get to that.
I'm sure we will.
We will. All right. Can I scroll down or something?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I don't know why I wasn't scrolling for you. Here we go. Let's verse 4.
Yeah. No, yeah,
5.
that was 4. So 5. The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out from among them. Moses and Aaron did so. They did just as the Lord commanded them. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. They were basically just like babies then. Because as we know, people lived a lot longer back then.
Yeah, they lived both of them to 120.
Yeah, quite a coincidence right there.
But it makes you wonder, because they're in the latter third of their life now, right? So in like our years, like in normal human years, let's say everyone lives to about 80, 85. That's still stretching it for some people, but
I would say.
I mean, basically, that's like not calling somebody to do the job until they're like almost 60.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a prime time to call somebody to lead an entire people group, 2.5 million people through a 40-year wandering in the desert.
Hey, do you think that like Moses and Aaron were protected against like having heart attacks or something?
You'd think so.
You know what I mean? It's like that stuff just randomly happens to people sometimes.
Randomly.
Do you think, they'd write all this and then God would be like, okay, gotta find somebody else.
You ever see the pictures of U.S. presidents before and after, like their 4 and 8 year terms?
Yeah.
Moses and Aaron did it for 40 years. So, like, think of the toll that this would have taken on them.
Mm-hmm.
God would have had to, like, supernaturally protect them from heart attacks and cancer, things like that.
That's what I think. But they never mention anything.
Stress-induced ulcers.
Right, yeah.
Migraine headaches.
Mm-hmm.
All the things that you get when you've got 2.5 million people following you in the desert, and they never shut up and stop complaining.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they can't be like, I'm going to pull this car over if you don't pipe down. You got 2.5 million people.
It's a lot of people.
It's a whole bunch.
It's a big car.
I can see why he got so mad and smacked that rock twice.
Well, you know what? I can't. You know what? I think he deserved to be out of the promised land for that.
What? Not even at that passage.
I'm just saying,
I
kicking
can't believe
rocks.
you said that.
What? Kicking rocks deserves.
God told him to smack the rock.
We'll get to that later. All right.
All right. Yeah. We'll say. Well, we're gonna shelf this argument for later.
All right.
Okay.
Got
a lot of notes there in verse 5.
Not all I'm gonna read.
That's like, so. Then we're on to verse 6.
Yeah, Aaron's.
How come I don't see verse 6 in your notes?
What? It's there. It's there.
Where?
What? Right there.
It says verse 8. Oh, it's up there.
Yeah.
Oh, did you read that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Thanks for listening, though. That's
I thought
cool.
you were just reading verse 5.
No, I read up until I stopped reading.
I'm so lost. Okay, so we are in verse 8 then. Let me make sure that
thought we
our
were.
screen. This is such a professional podcast. There we go. We got the next paragraph on the screen now.
All right,
Let's have it.
All right, Aaron's miraculous rod. What? All right, yeah.
That's the heading in the Bible.
I know.
Why would they put that there?
Oh.
Aaron's miraculous rod. I can't. Let's just read it. I can't talk about this.
Okay. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, perform a wonder, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake. So even Aaron performs the miracles now?
I mean,
I wonder if the Pharaoh was just like ignoring Moses completely at this point.
It's legitimately turning out to be a one-man show.
Right.
Like, why do we need Moses for anything here?
Mm.
It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So, but here's the fun thing, though. Remember the old Charleston Heston movie and all like the YouTube,
Sure do.
narrations of this, where like they have a rod and they throw it on the ground and it looks like a gardener snake or a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was doing some reading in the Hebrew text because I was just curious if they used the same word for snake in Genesis. Gosh.
Okay.
And they didn't.
Okay.
They used the Hebrew word tanin, which actually goes all the way back to ancient Akkadian and Ugaritic, and it typically means like a river monster, like akin to a Leviathan or a Rahab. Which leads me to believe that it wasn't just an ordinary like rattler. I think it was a real scary snake.
I mean, how do about if it ate the other three, right?
That's what I'm thinking. It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
If God's magic snake, Aaron's amazing rod, was like, very like serpentine monstery.
I mean, all right. Anyhow, I was just gonna say.
I'm making it worse. I gotta stop talking.
It's obvious that Aaron probably did have a big rod. That's I don't know. I don't know. No. All right. I did not write this.
I didn't write the Bible either. I can't help that it just happens to be true. But the selection of Hebrew words would lead you to believe that Aaron's, Aaron's snake is girthier than.
Do you think that
the Egyptians?
That guy who was writing the subtitles or whatever? You said there was a guy who wrote all this, right? Think this is like an inside joke or not at all?
You know what? I've met enough biblical scholars to know that a lot of them are older, and this type of innuendo goes right over their head.
Really?
They have no idea it's happening in front of them.
Okay.
I can't envision somebody our age making that type
Right.
of a blunder.
Right.
I mean, never know.
Yeah.
The older guard of biblical scholars believe a lot of weird things and they miss a lot of obvious things. I had a Bible professor who literally believed that if you were doing what's that stretching that the girl
Yoga?
Yeah, yoga. He literally believed that you can get like demon possessed if you did yoga.
I've heard that.
Yeah, but have you heard anyone our age who believes that?
No.
That's definitely something that you wouldn't hear anyone repeating unless they were like 70 and they watch like, TBN. That there's a classification of people. And it's not like young educated people. Anyways, all I'm saying is that I think when the editor wrote Aaron's miraculous rod, they have no idea what they're saying.
I get what you're saying. I also think that maybe that's not true.
It could be an inside joke.
Right. Are there not inside jokes in the Bible?
Oh, there are inside jokes.
There are a lot of innuendos, right?
There's a bunch
That people don't usually point out.
There's a really good one where I forget where it was. Shoot, yeah, it might be in Isaiah where it talks about the eunuch. That because previously in Deuteronomy, eunuchs had they weren't universally accepted by God, but in Isaiah's text for the future prophecy of the kingdom says that the eunuchs will not be cut off.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one. The eunuchs will not be cut off.
They definitely knew that one, right?
Yeah, obviously Isaiah knew what he was doing with that one. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isaiah, well, I mean, there was 3 authors of Isaiah, to be clear, but the authors, plural, of Isaiah, they were pretty damn good wordsmiths. Like, they definitely knew what they were doing. Anyway, I mean, but technically it was the oracle of God, so you would say God knew it. But it just happens to be that when God spoke through Isaiah, he had better words. Which is a weird thing, because imagine for a second that God dictated the words to all the prophets and the prophets wrote down what God said.
Yeah.
It's weird that God's vocabulary changes from prophet to prophet.
A little weird.
Right? Just like if God dictated the Pentateuch to Moses. So weird that his vocabulary goes through random changes. The traditional view of God dictating to people doesn't hold up when you actually study it. It's way more nuanced than that. It has to be God, as most people in academia would say, God didn't dictate the Bible. He inspired people to write, using the Holy Spirit, divine revelation, not necessarily dictate.
Paraphrasing, right? No, it isn't. 100%.
I mean, in their own language.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In English.
Yeah, of course, yes. God dictated the Bible in King James English.
All right.
What's our next passage? Well, what did we just read? We did 8 and 9.
Yeah, so let's do 10.
Fantastic.
So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did as the Lord had commanded. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did the same by...
Tight. Get it all out?
I think so.
Fantastic. The demons out.
By the... Where...
I think we're on 11?
Okay. Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did the same by their secret. Each one threw down his staff and became snakes, but Aaron's staff. I think in the movie, the magicians hid snakes inside their bag.
You know what? It's actually been over 10 years since I've watched the 10 Commandments.
No, yeah, I've been a lot.
It might be, maybe when we finish Exodus, we owe it to ourselves to do a live viewing.
That would be fun.
Of that movie, and we could do commentary.
Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah, in fact, I think we have to do it now.
Okay.
Mentioned.
Let's do it.
Because not only is it an amazing movie, but it'd be useful to review it directly after reading Exodus.
And we're gonna be pausing it a lot, aren't we?
Oh, we are.
Okay.
It's gonna be a 5-hour movie.
Yeah. It'll be 2 weeks long.
The best special effects that 19.
Mm-hmm.
It was the 50s, right? Was it 60s or 50s?
I don't know. 40s.
Was it that old?
Not. It was
Wow.
pretty old.
It is old.
So, yeah.
Yeah, not much to comment there, right?
I don't know. It's interesting that the magicians were able to emulate the miracle well enough for the Pharaoh to be unconvinced. I mean, It doesn't actually say his heart is being hardened at all, or ever, really.
Right. Well, there's something interesting.
Yeah.
Because okay, so we've got some of these like plagues or tricks that the magicians are able to and I can see why the Pharaoh wouldn't be necessarily moved or convinced by them. If you go up and you do a magic trick, or a sign from God, your magicians can do something remotely similar.
Mm.
People are like, well, I don't give a damn about all this nonsense on account of these goofballs can do the same thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
why would you be impressed? But to the point, I did. Have you ever watched Snake Charmers?
No, but I've seen cartoons of them.
Snake Charmers are like
Similar.
they're wild. I want to show you a video of a snake charmer,
All right, I'll watch it.
and like it's hard to believe what they can and cannot do.
Ask the Pharaoh to let their people go. He refuses.
You know this.
To show the... Apparently, it's the old snake trick that all of them knew.
If you think he's about to get himself killed, right?
Video, I know.
But watch what he can do with this snake. Without
Today's
getting himself
Egyptian
killed.
snake charmers still know how to do it. They're good showmen, with plenty of razzle-dazzle. But in the end, the trick is still pretty impressive. The snake charmer winds the snake around a staff, and the snake becomes immobile, and the head appears to be the top of the staff. Moses must have shown the Pharaoh something just like this.
Maybe not like that, but I mean, the snake is just kind of letting things happen, right? So my thought is, like, if the ancient magicians were really good snake charmers, there's like a lot of tricks you could do with this
When the snake is returned to the ground,
if they're this
it
docile.
reanimates and rears up.
Like he wraps the snake up in a bundle.
One of Egypt's most lethal killers.
And the snake's just like, whatever. Right? Why would it let him do that? I don't know. I'm not a snake charmer.
Modern Egyptian snake charmers perform a trick that must be a holdover from pharaonic times. They take a cobra, the symbol of the king's power, and tie it in a knot and place it on their heads, so the cobra's head points outward, just like on the pharaoh's crown.
Anyways, so all that to say,
Yeah.
the ancient Egyptian snake charmers, they had some skill sets, right? They must have been pretty good, I would imagine.
I wonder why God chose to do snakes then. Well, he must have known they wouldn't be that impressive, right?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to touch on that. Like some of these initial tricks that the magicians can do, God had to have known they weren't going to be effective.
Right.
So why do them?
I don't know.
I don't know either. It doesn't compute, right? Like,
Right.
Unless I don't know. It's a weird thing because like if he's trying to demonstrate the folly of the magicians, maybe like, hey, listen, your magicians can do some of these things, but they can never do anything real like what I'm about to do.
Mhm.
Like, is he leading them down a path into false hope just to crush their dreams, or
I don't know.
what's the deal here? It certainly does seem like a waste of time.
A lot of this is a waste of time.
So every day that goes by in which he's performing these dumb tricks that don't prove anything,
Mm.
the Hebrew people are getting whipped and enslaved
Well,
to make bricks with stubble.
right.
You know what I mean? I'm just saying it feels like time is of the essence. Right? Your people are being burdened in such a way.
I don't think God has ever felt time of the essence.
Yeah, I agree. I
Ever.
don't think he cares about it. They were slave for 400 years.
Right. What's another couple days?
A couple of days of the Hebrew people getting utterly humiliated by the Egyptians. This is drop in the bucket, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Let's read
13.
13, yes.
However, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. So the Pharaoh might have seen the miracle and been like, oh, shoot, this guy's for real. But then God was like, nope, not enough people have died yet.
Basically.
I mean, God wouldn't have needed to harden his heart if the Pharaoh was, already not already convinced.
I
Right?
agree. Yeah, there's no need for God to harden Pharaoh's heart unless at some point the heart's going to need to be hardened.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it does make you wonder, like it says, still Pharaoh's heart was hardened and he would not let them, he would not listen to them. But like everyone in the story knew that was going to happen. God said that Pharaoh's not going to listen.
Mm.
He's not going to pay you any heed, and I'm going to harden his heart. All this seems like charades.
Yeah.
I mean, we know what the end goal is already. So why all the fluff?
I really don't know. I mean, it looks as though this wasn't even the first plague, and Pharaoh was ready to say, all right, just take him. But God is like, no, we're going to harden your heart. So even before all the plagues started, we could have just cut all this out, right?
Well, I think the question we have to ask in verse 13 is, did God harden Pharaoh's heart, or did Pharaoh harden his own heart?
I don't think you can harden your own heart. Makes no sense.
Hard to say.
No, it isn't. I just said so. Yeah, you're funny. Just leave the jokes to me. All right. I mean, you can't harden your own heart. You either feel the way you do or you don't.
I think there's a section in here where it says Pharaoh hardened his own heart. I think it'll come up.
Okay. This reminds me of a very stupid thing I heard on the radio the other day. They were talking about Pharaoh's heart getting hardened. And the person thought that every time the Pharaoh's heart was hardened, it meant that he was having a heart attack. And I just had to laugh at that one because that made no sense. Like, he would have let the Jews go, but he was having a heart attack at the time. So couldn't really say anything.
You think Pharaoh was getting hard because he saw Aaron's amazing rod?
Boy.
We're off the rails.
All right.
We're way off the rails now. We're going to get smitten.
All right. Well, we can't be any more blacklisted than we already are. Smoted, yes.
Smoted, yeah.
Smitten is a little different.
Smitten is like you're struck with love.
It is, yeah.
But you would think it'd be the same word, but it's really not.
It isn't. Isn't that weird?
It's weird. Language is very...
It is. I concur.
Let's read the next.
Let's do it. All right. So let me preface this with a very huge paragraph that's unnecessary. Okay. So I've been waiting forever to discuss the plagues, and I know you have too. Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is one of the best parts of Exodus.
There we go. I'm a big believer that if miracles can be explained by scientific or rational means, that just shows how even more impressive the feat is. I mean, any book can be like, and then God pulled monkeys out of his butt, and expect the reader to blindly believe it. But I like it when the miracles can technically be recreated by using the same laws of physics that God set the universe in motion with. I think that makes sense. It requires less suspension of disbelief and also shows that the miracles could have actually happened. And I suppose it makes the actual miracles, like raising the dead, healing, whatever, even more impressive because, we can compare those to the other miracles, and yeah, I don't know. That's just what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is, whenever we look at any of the miracles, I am going to be trying to figure out how it could have happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories on this. In fact, there was a documentary done. It must have been ago now on like a scientific explanation for how the plagues could have taken place.
Yeah.
Um, I don't particularly find a lot of them plausible, but there certainly could have been, like when we read through them, there certainly could be a scientific explanation for these plagues, especially if the first plague of the water,
Yeah.
if that happens, it seems like there's going to be a cascade effect.
I mentioned that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think if
Yeah.
if something happens to the water, there's going to be a
Yeah.
cascade effect. Maybe we should read on because a lot of the first 4 plagues seem to be
Just connected to the first one, right?
yeah, they all seem to be connected to the plague of the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What time do we have to finish this chapter by? That will do the next chapter.
I don't know. Don't worry about
I'm always
trying to
worried.
get as much done as possible.
Yeah, I just want this done by Christmas.
And you can read it before Christmas. We have to
I don't want to.
can't left any good talking point go unturned.
I don't want to spoil it. All right.
No talking point left behind.
Fine. Yeah, you made it just something. All right. Okay. Let's.
Is it 14?
Yeah. So then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. You think after Moses heard this, he was like, yeah, because you hardened it. Or maybe God didn't tell Moses and that God was Pharaoh's obstinance.
Right.
Like, did Moses know that God was the reason they still weren't able to leave? I don't know.
So here's the weird thing. The Hebrew word that's typically used to talk about Pharaoh's hardened heart is chazak, which means to strengthen or to grow firm or to stiffen or to harden.
Yeah.
But in verse 14, it doesn't say that actually, which is, it drives me crazy when you have an English translation and it translates 2 different Hebrew words identically.
Yeah.
Because if the original author intended the words to be read identically, it wouldn't have used different words, right?
Sounds believable.
So it says Pharaoh's heart is hardened, but it doesn't say that. It actually uses the word kavad, which is the verbal form of kavod, which means to become heavy, giving the impression that he's feeling a burden, which is way different than becoming stubborn. Like if you said your heart was heavy, that'd be way different than saying your heart is hardened. So this is one situation in which I think the NRSV is doing everybody a disservice. And I'm curious if we go back to the New King James Version, what it says here. 'Cause I suspect the New King James did the same thing. So the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hard. Same thing. Why would they say that?
Don't worry, I'm looking up the message. Give me a second.
Let's do the message. Oh boy. I got the message here.
Nice.
God said to Moses, Pharaoh is a stubborn man.
Stubborn, yep.
That's not what's being implied at all.
No, I wonder if any of them gets it right.
I don't know. I understand that they want to continue the narrative of his heart being hardened because that's like the meta narrative. But it just I don't like the NIV all that much, but they did something interesting with it. They said, then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is unyielding, rather than saying hardened. Because in verse 13 it says Pharaoh's heart became hard, and then in 14 it says his heart is unyielding, which I could see that being a better use of the 2 different words as opposed to what the other translations are trying to say. What the NLT did with it. So this is fun. I like this one. So the NLT says in verse 13, Pharaoh's heart, however, remained hard. And then in 14 it says Pharaoh's heart is stubborn. So they're trying to allude to the fact that it's a difference in words. But I don't know. I would expect more of these good English translations to pick up on these differences, and I don't know if they just got lazy or what. What are you gonna do?
I don't.
That's all I had to say about it. I don't think verse 14 is saying that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. I think it's saying that his heart was being made heavy.
Inflicted?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually just think that's the opposite. I think his heart was made heavy. He was conflicted, yet he refused to let the people go, which paints a different picture than his heart was even more hardened and he refused to let the people. Because now he's starting to sound a little bit more like, he's not completely hard.
Right. Why?
This chapter.
All right. Huh.
This chapter is gonna. Anyways, I mean, innuendos aside,
Right.
Pharaoh's heart is not completely hard.
Right.
Apparently, in some cases, it's flaccid.
All right, don't talk.
I can't stop it. I can't stop. Okay, let's just keep reading.
All right. Flaccid heart. What? All right. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water. Stand at the banks of the Nile to meet him, and take in your hand the staff that was turned into a snake. Say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to say to you, let my people go.
Right. So what for what?
So that they may serve me in the wilderness.
Right, exactly.
But until now you have not listened. That was it. Look at them. Look, that was Moses.
I know, that's why I said, isn't it weird that
That was Moses.
The people talking goes back and forth between Moses and Aaron?
I'm not sure it does. Right now it looks like it's mostly Aaron. They just gave Moses that really cool.
Yeah, I mean, so it says, go to Pharaoh in the morning. It said, then the Lord said to Moses that his heart is hardened, and it says, go to Pharaoh and then say to him. So did Moses actually say it, or was Moses told to say it? Because he says, go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water, and stand at the bank of the Nile to meet him, and take in your hand the staff that was turned into a snake, and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to say to you. But is he really talking to Moses, or is he talking to Moses and Aaron with the expectation that Aaron is the one delivering the message? You know
or
what I mean?
just talking to Moses with the expectation that Moses will do.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it. Yeah, I think to me that's the way it reads.
Okay, well, sorry, Moses.
But yeah, sorry, Moses.
Yeah.
You get no spotlight. I mean, you'll get a spotlight eventually, Moses. Anything else?
No.
All right. 17, 18, 19, 20, 30, 40? What
17, 18, and 19.
17.
Thus says the Lord, by this you shall know that I am the Lord. See, with the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water that is in the Nile, and it shall be turned to blood. The fish in the river shall die, the river itself shall stink, and the Egyptians shall be unable to drink water from the Nile. The Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over its rivers, its canals, and its ponds, and all its pools of water, so that they may become blood, and there shall be blood throughout the whole land of Egypt, even in vessels of wood and in the vessels of stone. Yeah, so these passages, they parallel each other? Just because there were two different narratives and they shoved them together there?
I mean, it's possible. It could just be poetic repetition.
There's a lot of that.
That is a real thing.
How do you know it's poetic repetition and not two narratives being shoved together?
It can actually be a little bit hard to know the difference. Usually you can spot it when they're using identical phrases. They're repeating it on purpose, word for word. You'll see that a lot. Like if you read the ancient Akkadian writings from Babylon and Assyria, you'll see a lot of it. Um, where it just sounds needlessly repetitious,
Yeah.
but it's only because it's in poetic form and you don't catch the poetry in English. Like if you were reading it in the original language, you could catch the poetry.
Why would it sound nice or something?
Yeah, it would rhyme. It would have meter to it.
Okay.
And you would understand, oh, this is like a poetic narrative. And the majority of ancient writings had a form of poetry to it. It was an art. It wasn't just something that somebody did crudely. You know what I mean? It wasn't until people became more literate that it started to become used more mundanely, and it was just something people did as opposed to an art form. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like when people were like really great home builders and craftsmen in the Victorian era, and now down in our era, everything is just bare bones, basic. You paid for a house, you get for a house.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how writing developed as well.
Okay, that's probably too bad.
Yeah, people got much more task oriented and much less artistic over time.
Pithy. Okay. So they turned all water into blood?
Yeah.
I thought it was just the Nile.
Yeah. I'm on the same page as you
Oh,
here.
okay.
We're thinking the same thing right now.
Also like well water, bathtubs.
Seems like all of it.
What about the morning dew?
That might be the only thing left out, because it already says over the waters of Egypt. That's plural. And then it says rivers, canals, ponds, all of its pools of water.
And yet we know that's not true when you keep reading.
That literally cannot be true.
Yeah.
Because in the very next paragraph, the magicians turn water into blood. But what water?
Yeah, I don't get that.
What water are they turning to blood?
I don't know. They must have just been exaggerating.
Well, that's my thought.
That's how it could be. Because, I mean, we know just a little bit later that they were able to still get water.
Yeah,
out
it's
of the
like
ground.
Hyperbole for the effect of
Yeah.
sounding magnificent. Magnifying speech. Certainly, you have to believe that it's some sort of a poetic license being used. But there was an interesting note by Douglas Stewart. He was a Bible scholar, and he wrote a commentary. And he says it's noteworthy that the magicians did not attempt to undo the trick here, which is
Right.
a point that I didn't think of prior. Because remember when they're doing the tricks, they're trying to replicate the tricks. But if they're really good magicians who knew how the tricks were done, they would be attempting to undo them because they want to end the pain and the affliction that they're experiencing. But they never actually do that. They never try to undo it.
Right.
Which I think is the first clue that they're not good. They're not as good as we might perceive them to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because if you can do the trick, but you can't undo the trick, you got a big problem.
Yeah, they might be poor imitations, but the Pharaoh wants to believe anyhow.
But this is also, I think, foreshadowing. Because somebody does undo the tricks. And it's God.
Oh, yes, I've heard of him.
God is the only one that can undo any of these tricks.
Yeah.
All of the magic that we see is magic that is being done but not undone.
Mm-hmm.
So God is not just the great doer, he's the great undoer, which is a really interesting concept. Yeah, that's all I had to say about that, though.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I have a little more. Vessels of wood and vessels of stone. What's that mean?
Typically, when they say vessels, this would be the way that you would refer to like a pot or even a bowl. Any type of liquid or solid containing container, they just refer to as vessel.
Oh, so this is just like bowls that people will drink out of or something.
Yeah,
And
probably
we
clay
know that's
pots.
not the case since the magicians tried to use their own that had water in it. That I assume wasn't blood at the time.
Yeah, so that's the thing is it says even in the vessels of wood and vessels of stone.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, if all of the vessels of wood and all of the vessels of stone, that water became blood, there would be nothing left for the Egyptians to turn into blood.
Mm.
You know what I mean? You can't take. There's no way you can take this as being literally true. You have to have some sort of leniency.
My guess is that the narrator must have even known that since the very next verse contradicts it. So he's probably like, oh, yeah, they know I'm just exaggerating.
I think so, and because like if you read the war annals of the ancient Babylonian and Assyrian kings,
Mm-hmm.
they say things that are similar. Like so, for example, when King Hezekiah is being pursued by the Babylonian king during the invasion, he says that King Hezekiah was so overcome by his radiance and so fearful in flight that he defecated in his chariot.
Okay.
Now, that's not. It seems very unlikely to be factual to history. And there's other things too. Like there was when the walls are breached, the king says that the defending army was taken aback because they were so overcome by the radiance of the king. That's really hyperbolic. Obviously not true.
Yeah.
So I think these types of exaggerations are somewhat common in the literature from this time period
Mm-hmm.
because you're always trying to emphasize the greatness of the hero, even
Mhm.
if that emphasis is a little bit beyond reality.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
I get that.
I kind of feel a little bit that is happening here.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got to say about
All right. Well, we got 15 minutes. Then we'll start chapter 2.
that. We're not even close to chapter 8 yet.
All right. Anyhow, we'll see.
I love how we already titled the episode chapter 7 and 8, and we're probably only going to get through chapter 7.
If that's true, I'm going to start speaking real slowly.
Just go ahead. Go ahead.
Chapter 20?
But we're on chapter 7 still. You mean verse 20?
That's what I meant.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Read verse 20 for us.
Moses and Aaron
Right?
did just as the Lord.
Okay, there. Is your heart getting hardened?
I'm just going to go real slowly here, all right?
Why would you?
That way we'll just be here all night anyhow.
I don't want to be here all night.
I do.
I mean, I love reading the text with you. Go home and tuck your wife.
Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded. In the sight of Pharaoh and of his officials, he lifted up the staff and struck the water in the Nile. All the water in the river was turned into blood. And the fish in the river died. I felt like I had just read this. The river stank so that the Egyptians could not drink its water, and there was blood throughout the whole land of Egypt. So the river stank because of the dead fish?
You would think so.
Blood doesn't have a smell of its own, right?
Much. It almost. I've smelt blood before, and it smells almost a little metallic-y, but it doesn't really.
Nobody ever says, man, this place smells like somebody just bled all over it. That'd be weird.
It has to be the dead animals.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm taking away from this. It's the dead animal smell. We've all smelled dead animal.
Yeah.
It's pretty big. Now here's the thing. It says all the fish died.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But I mean, it seems logical to conclude that other animals died too, right?
Well,
Alligators, maybe?
yeah, maybe. A lot of them, though. Well, I mean, right away, you mean?
Tadpoles.
I don't like reptiles.
I'm just saying there's a lot of things that live in the water. I know the fish have to die because they can't escape.
Mm-hmm.
But But there are some water, like
Okay.
amphibious animals that would be harmed too, right?
Yeah. They're breathing in blood.
You would think so, right?
I don't think you can breathe in blood that well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of what all lives in the river other than just fish. That'd be something.
You know.
It's weird to me that all of the rivers, including the Nile, turned to blood, but it doesn't say anything about the Mediterranean. Because the Nile River empties into the Mediterranean, and if the whole Nile turned into blood, it would have spilled into the Mediterranean Sea,
Okay.
which means it would have affected everybody on the Mediterranean too. But we didn't. There's no writings from the Mediterranean.
Well,
about
I
this.
guess if we're just going to do this one chapter only, I might as well ask you a very hard question.
Okay.
What was the...
Well, according to the narrative, it was blood.
Because, like, what if we had, like, one of those DNA testing kits? Whose DNA would that have been, you know? Or, when you kill a fish, does that bleed? Fish bleed.
Fish do bleed.
So, could it have just been, like, some sort of virus that killed all the animals, and then they started bleeding, and then it just looked, and it was blood?
Maybe
Or, you know what I mean?
God split all the fish open, and that's why it turned to blood.
I didn't say that, but something like...
Well, imagine that's the thing that took place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's any more like interesting than if it just went from water to blood.
Well, I disagree.
I mean, the thing of it is, though, as we're about to see, you know, the magicians can do the same thing, which means that there must be a naturalistic explanation for it.
Right. Okay.
But is God doing the same trick as the magicians?
I mean,
I would imagine they're different.
yeah, and I get that, but we still can't believe the water was actually blood.
Why not?
Because that makes no sense. There's no logic in that.
What do you mean? The God of the Bible spoke things into existence. Why can't he turn water into blood?
Where's the blood going to come from? Whose DNA is it?
God just made it.
So it has no DNA?
Well, okay, he made blood.
Yeah.
He spoke it into existence.
Yeah.
Why can't he put it into a river?
You know, it's not that impressive.
Not impressive to turn water into blood.
No, it's not impressive to have somebody say, God just did this.
But that's what the Bible says all the time. God just spoke and the earth became the earth.
Yeah, but I meant the miracles. I need a real explanation.
The creation of the cosmos isn't a miracle?
I didn't say that. Just saying. There's got to be a way that you can do this without it being miraculous.
Well, there are waters that have turned red before.
See?
Naturally.
Reach it.
I mean, there's a river
The Red Sea?
In Russia. Turn red. Right? I think it was in Russia. It was caused by a discharge from a metallurgy plant. So basically, it was from rust.
Okay, they didn't have that stuff back then, right?
Well, they had rust.
Was there any near the Nile?
The
Wait,
Nile.
is that really a real picture of it?
I'm working
Yeah,
on.
that's what the river looked like.
That's really blood looking. So my guess is that it wasn't blood, but it certainly looked like blood. And to the people back in the day, they didn't know any difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a
I
possibility.
mean, if they see red water, they're going to be like, oh, it must be blood. They're not going to think, oh, is that, fruit punch or something.
Yeah, it's possible it turned to something other than blood. But if that's the case, though, why would God tell them it's going to turn to blood?
Well,
If it's not, why wouldn't he just say the river is going to turn red like blood?
probably, another one of them hyperboles.
Could be.
There's a lot of times when you say something is going to literally be something else without saying like or as, and you can always know that it, the sun is smiling. and what that means is the sun is probably bright something. Like, you put me on the spot, but my point is just that, just because God says, hey, it's gonna be blood, that could very easily just mean, hey, it's going to be red.
It could be. Yeah, my personal opinion is that it just.
That makes no sense.
Why does it make sense? God, why can God not do that?
What are they supposed to do with a bunch of blood?
God literally split a sea so that people can walk through it.
I mean, well,
That's what it says.
Maybe, but I also think there's a logical explanation for that too.
He made manna fall from heaven.
Well, maybe we can figure out how that happened. I don't know. We haven't gotten there, right? So you'll have to think about that, all right? And I'll have to think about it.
At some point, you just have to admit that God can do the miracle.
I have no problem with him doing the miracles. I just like it when humans can do them too. Theoretically.
You just want explainable answers for the unexplainable so it doesn't seem so silly. But like if God is real, like he could just do these.
Yeah, but I don't think he does.
But why couldn't he?
I think he plays by his not like I think he plays by his own rules that he made. Like he made the rules, so he's gonna, do things within the confines of the rules.
Well, that can't be possible because Jesus was dead, rose from the dead.
Yeah, but
That's outside the rules.
Obviously, we're excluding that.
Barren women become pregnant in their old age.
Do they though?
That's literally the whole story of Abraham and Sarah.
Was it though?
He rejuvenated her so that she was a beautiful woman at age 70.
You know what? I will bet you any amount of money, as long as it's under $5, that that you would Google the internet or whatever, and you would find that there were women who have gotten pregnant well into their 80s. It just would be rare.
Yeah, it probably did happen. The oldest woman to ever give birth. See, this is what happens. This is why we can never get anything done.
Hey, you're the one that said knowledge first, right?
I agree. No talking point left undone.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the oldest woman to ever give birth is Iramati Mangamama
in 2019. So this isn't even like old or anything,
Well, it was at the age of 73, and it was using IVF, and that's
cheating. Yes.
okay. All right, there's some things here.
Yeah.
Okay. We have to take a pause for a second. Why is somebody 73 doing IVF?
I'm sure there's got to be a reason.
Why would they not legally tell her, no, we can't do that for you? You're 70. You shouldn't be having children at 73.
I don't know.
I'm gonna click on the wiki.
I
have to hear about this. Why? Why would somebody do that? Okay, gave birth at 73 through in vitro fertilization via cesarean section. The holy city of Hyderabad, India. She delivered. She had twins.
Mm-hmm.
But why?
Guess she just wanted children. That's not illegal.
But it was through IVF.
Yeah. So I mean, it's possible. It's
possible.
That's how God did it.
It is possible, but I don't see why it's necessary to take God's miracles and try to make them explain.
I just think it's more impressive because it makes
it less impressive.
It makes them sound believable.
If it could happen naturally, you wouldn't need God.
Yeah, but it only technically could happen naturally. So God had to, set everything perfectly.
Well, if it can happen naturally, then God doesn't have to do anything. It can just be a natural phenomenon.
Yeah, but at the right time in the right place.
That's how natural phenomena work. Sometimes rare things happen.
I know. But obviously, like
a four-leaf clover is exceedingly rare worldwide, but people find them every year.
No, those aren't really rare, but I get what you're saying. You're probably thinking of like a 5-leaf. But my point is, when Moses parted the sea, now I read somewhere that with the right wind conditions or whatever,
Wind?
Yeah, I said wind.
Ever seen wind make a canal through water? A land canal through water?
When
You
it's
ever see that?
when it's the right conditions.
Has anyone ever witnessed wind split a body of water?
When it's the right conditions.
Who said this? I don't believe it.
No. It was on like TV or something. It's on one of those those shows where it's like biblical secrets explained or something.
It's ridiculous.
I'm just saying it's possible.
Even a hurricane wouldn't do it. Have you ever seen a hurricane?
I mean, who really knows?
If there was wind rushing through a body of water so strong that it would split the water in half, it would kill everybody that walked through it. All the Israelites would have been dead.
I mean,
it'd be like a 7,000 mile an hour wind. It would like vaporize them.
I don't think this is true. Listen, what if there was wind blowing on one side and wind blowing on the other? It's like the eye of a tornado. Right in the center of it, there's no wind.
They'd all be smushed.
No, you don't get.
Because the wind would just be turbulent in the middle. It'd push everybody into the middle and be nothing but turbulence.
Well, what if the wind kept moving as they were going?
Moving where?
Off to the end, to the land area.
Then you have the same problem that we had before the two different winds.
No, because say it's just a big tornado.
But how do you have a wind strong enough to move water, but it's not going to affect the people?
Well, I just said, if you're in the eye of a tornado, what happens?
That's spinning wind.
Yeah.
You can't split a body of water into even parts by spinning wind.
I mean, maybe you can.
And
yeah. I mean, I don't know. Do you know?
Yeah.
You think you have an idea?
What happens when you spin water? Makes a funnel.
Okay.
Not a divide. It makes a funnel.
Well, what if there were two tornadoes, one on each side?
And you have two funnels.
I'm just saying. I think it's possible. I think it's possible.
I think you just have to accept that it's a miracle.
It is a miracle. I said it was.
But then why do you need a hurricane? Just say that God split the water.
No, I'm just saying that what happened was.
If you're going to say it's a miracle, just let it be a miracle.
I don't have to. Miracles are more impressive when you can, duplicate them.
It would be the least impressive thing if they're duplicatable, because that means you don't need God for it.
You don't need him, except for the fact that it has to be at the exact right time, the exact right place, and the exact right conditions for this. I mean, what conditions are going to produce the right wind to lift, water off of, in part a sea? I'll tell you what, something very, very rare.
The same conditions that are rare that allowed amino acids to form on meteorites. You aware that we've probed 2 meteorites in the last 10 years and found amino acids that have self-assembled on the meteorites?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's an incredibly rare phenomenon,
Okay.
yet it happened.
Okay.
But we wouldn't call that a miracle. It's just a very rare natural phenomenon. So, that's not impressive.
Okay, but what if they assembled right in front of somebody who needed amino acids to live, and he was able to lick that asteroid and live? You would say that was a miracle.
The timing itself would make it more miraculous.
Bam. Why can't timing alone be miraculous?
But again, I don't understand why any of it's necessary once you already have the belief in a supernatural being who can do miracles.
I'm not saying it's necessary. I'm
Then
just saying it's
why
not.
force it?
I'm not forcing it.
The Bible says God does a miracle. Just believe God did a miracle.
I don't have to. I just think it's more impressive when we can explain it.
I think it's less impressive when we can explain it.
But then it's just magic. Ooh.
I know, that's why it's not impressive. Because magic happens every day and it's not real.
Wait, what?
Magic is not impressive. Miracles are impressive.
Right. But if you don't know how a miracle happened, it's basically just magic.
No, I disagree.
Well, agree to disagree then.
I will agree to disagree on this one.
All right. I am going to figure that out, though.
We'll argue about it next week, though. The week after.
Okay. Well,
until we're done with the plagues.
When we have a plague, we're going to discuss how it actually happened,
Fair enough. I'll give you the same answer. God did a miracle.
Well, I'll tell you something about this bloody water. I think I read somewhere, maybe, that what could have caused it was like just a bunch of wind blew a bunch of berries off of trees. And, they got crushed inside the water.
You gotta stop blaming everything on the wind.
The wind does a lot of things. The wind does a lot of
What
things.
kind of berries are we talking about?
Probably the red ones. Actually, you know what? They could be red and poisonous.
What kind of berry?
Hold on. Poisonous red ones, which is why it kills the fish.
What kind of red poisonous berries grow on trees that are abundant in Egypt?
Don't have to be in Egypt. That's the wind.
The wind's going to carry them across the earth all the way to the water.
That's why it's a miracle.
And you think that's more impressive than God just turning the water into blood through just an act of miracle?
Listen, I will bet you $5 fake that there is such a thing as a berry like that in Egypt.
I'm going to look up red poisonous berry in Egypt.
Do it.
All right. We've got
what is that?
a belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade.
Nightshade
is a poisonous plant with red berries that is native to North Africa, Europe, and West Asia.
Ooh, you know where Egypt is? I'll give you a hint.
How many of these would you need to turn all the water into blood? Remember, even the vessels of water in people's houses.
Yes, we know that wasn't true, though.
Oh, so that part wasn't true.
That part was an exaggeration. That part. You know what's interesting? I have a program on my phone that will tell me all the answers to these questions.
Did you know that the internet shows you a distribution of this particular plant?
Okay. And
they're mostly in Europe. They're very sparsely in the land here.
So what you're saying is you'd need a lot of wind.
What I'm suggesting is I think your theory is silly.
Well, I bet you do.
Why would God blow at random a bunch of red berries across the world over to Egypt when he could just speak and turn the water to blood? And why did not a single person on the globe write about this powerful wind that carried berries cross-continent to Egypt?
Well, it's probably over water. Who's going to see that?
Are you aware that the Mediterranean people lived on the water?
Not inside of it.
Some of them did.
I doubt they live inside the water.
Do you know where Crete is?
Yeah, around the place.
It's getting crazy.
No, Crete. That
God blew poisonous berries across the map.
Yeah.
What happens when you put berries in water?
You tell me.
The water doesn't turn red.
Well, if they were all crunched up and stuff.
Okay, so God blew a strong wind across the globe to collect all the red berries, and then traverse crushed them, and then threw them into all the various
Well,
waters.
I'm sure the wind alone probably would crush them.
I wouldn't think so.
Why? Wind can push a lot of things.
Push it, but not crush.
I don't know.
Like I could throw a berry, but it doesn't crush until it hits something.
Well, you don't know that.
I do know that.
You think you do.
I do know that.
If there was a huge wall of wind blowing right at you, and you threw a berry at it, you're not telling me it would crush?
It would not.
I mean, it would splatter.
No, it would not.
It might.
It wouldn't.
What if it's a strong
wind? Air is super compressible.
Okay, what if you threw a berry into a tornado? What would happen?
Nothing would happen to it unless it collided with something.
I don't believe that.
High wind doesn't destroy anything like a berry until it collides with something.
I disagree.
I guess we agree to disagree on your magic berry.
I'm just saying
theory.
it's it's it could be the case.
This might be the worst theory I've ever heard on the water turning to blood. I mean, this could get an award for being a bad theory.
Very sweet of you.
I'm sticking with God just turned it to blood.
And then I guess you have more or less faith than me. So ChatGPT says you would need probably maybe just like 1 trillion berries.
1 trillion berries.
Yeah.
Do you think there's 1 trillion berries? Red poisonous berries in and around Egypt?
Again, it could be all around the world. Just a really strong wind.
And
right?
Nobody in the world bothered to write about this magic wind that carried off all of their berries.
Wasn't this before people really wrote stuff down?
No.
Yes, it was.
It was about 1,000 years after writing developed in Sumer and Egypt.
I don't believe that.
It is.
I don't believe that.
It is.
I don't believe that.
It is.
Oh yeah, when was Exodus written?
Theoretically, if Moses wrote it, it would have been.
I'm talking about really.
Oh, in reality,
Yes.
it was probably around the time of King David.
Exactly.
About 1,000.
Right. So it was never actually written when this happened.
Yeah, but writing was around. Writing had been around since the 3rd century BCE.
Well,
the 3rd millennium, I mean.
Who really knows, right?
Well, we do know. We've got ancient writings from Egypt and Sumer.
I mean, maybe we do, yeah.
Well, I know we do.
I'm saying maybe we do, yeah.
Okay. So people could write.
Maybe.
We know they could.
Then maybe.
We have their writings.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying maybe.
It's a positive yes. We have the writings.
Well, who knows?
Have you never seen the pyramids?
Yeah.
Have you not seen the writings contained in and around the pyramid?
I mean, I think I have.
The walls are literally covered with writing.
You mean like hieroglyphics? Now, hasn't it been proven that that was not a form of writing?
It absolutely is a form of writing.
No.
I'm going to prove it to you right now.
No, because there's not a one-to-one correlation between picture to meaning.
Yeah, there is.
No, there's not.
I've got, in fact, I've got an interlinear Book of the Dead right now. Where you can actually see
That's cheating.
what the individual symbols meant. This is in the syllabic form. So, for example, the word "go forth," you've got 4 different symbols to make up 2 syllables, the heb and the f. Heb in Egyptian would be to go forth. So in this particular era of the Book of the Dead, it was in syllabic format. And then later, it went to consonantal format, where a particular symbol could equal an individual letter instead of a syllable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. All those pictures, they only represent actual tangible things or ideas or what have you.
No syllables.
Hold on. That's why it's not a real language, because
no syllables.
But listen, because you can't.
Do you know what a syllable is?
Because you can't take.
Do you know what a syllable is?
Are you gonna let me finish or no? You can't take like individual pictures and put them together to form a new picture or word.
You can. Do you know what a syllable is?
I do.
Okay. Do you know you can combine different syllables to make different words?
Yeah, I'm just saying that's not how hieroglyphics work.
That's exactly how hieroglyphics work. So in the syllabic form, you combine various hieroglyphics to form combinations of syllables. Just like here, you've got the F singular consonantal syllable that's now combined with 2 other syllables to form a word, and you'll find it throughout. So you're combining random syllables to match what is already in the spoken language.
Well, then let me just say that's not what I learned.
I think you're wrong. In fact, I've got the Akkadian dictionary behind you on the bookshelf, because the Akkadian language is a syllabic language as well, where the individual symbols, there are like 2,000 of them, refer to the individual syllables of the language, and then you can combine them at random to form the words that you already know in your spoken language.
You're telling me that when we see them hieroglyphics with like people with like that, those are words?
Yeah.
Those are not representing
They're syllables.
No, they're not.
They're syllables.
It's a word picture.
It's a syllable.
It's a word picture.
It's a syllable, and I'm showing you in a book.
Okay, show me
where the individual syllables are.
No, show me where the guy with the spear is.
I don't know what page I would find that particular syllable, but
exactly.
There's a guy kneeling.
Where?
Right there.
I mean, that could be anybody.
I know, it's a guy kneeling.
Maybe. Are you looking up the spear? Maybe sure.
In fact, here is the consonantal form. So in later history, we had the consonantal form where individual icons were actual consonants.
Yeah, but not early history.
No, the earliest pictograms are different. So the languages had a form of evolution. Okay, so the earliest pictures.
I don't believe in evolution.
We're not talking about biological evolution. The earliest pictures did represent just a single idea, and then it got changed to a syllabic language where the individual pictures referred to a particular syllable within the language. And then we got to the last stage where they picked 20 syllable symbols that would just refer to a particular consonant, and then you had consonantal languages. So it went through an evolution, just like Akkadian, the Egyptian language went through an evolution from iconography all the way down to a consonantal text. What we find in the pyramid almost universally represents the syllabic language time frame.
Well, who really knows? All right, you want to continue with?
I mean, linguists know.
Really know.
That's why we've got the Egyptian Book of the Dead in front of us, decoded.
Except I have a degree in English.
By syllables.
Oh.
Well, this is an Egyptian.
Yeah.
See how every syllable has an icon?
Mm-hmm.
That's how syllabic language is.
Maybe. All right.
It is 100% how that works.
I'm saying that I'm not disagreeing.
Look at this word. You've got two syllables. Yeah, kesef K, and the K is an oil pot or something of that nature. Down here you've got Sao K. The K is symbolized by the same symbol. You're just joining that symbol to other symbols to create the syllables that mean the words. The syllabic language. How do you not learn about syllabic languages in history?
I know what syllables are. Hey, I got it from.
To be fair, English never had a syllabic phase.
That's. Yeah.
So, I mean, you wouldn't know about syllabic language.
Yeah, there aren't syllables in our language.
It's the older Semitic and Proto-Indo-European languages that had syllables, or like the ancient Phoenician at one point was syllabic and all. All right, let's keep reading. Where are we at? We're still on chapter 7.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was a good detour.
It was. I enjoyed that. You learn anything?
No, but it was interesting.
Good enough. All right.
I learned that you think berries can fly.
The wind, but no.
You think they would fly through the wind or roll on the ground?
What? They're flying.
You think berries just fly?
How can berries roll through water?
Through water.
They roll on the ground.
Why do you think berries can fly? Do you think God is making a wind strong enough that berries would fly through the air?
No, I'm saying it's theory.
That berries fly.
When there's wind.
Have you ever seen berries fly in a strong wind?
I haven't seen berries and wind at the same place. You know?
You think farmers would have a problem if random berries could fly? Think cranberry farmers would still be in business?
I don't know. I don't know what lengths they have to go to keep their cranberries from flying. I don't know that one.
I have a sneaky suspicion that there's no precautions that they put in place to keep their cranberries from flying away.
Well, maybe not.
We'll put that on the research. Let's carry on.
All right. So where are we at here? Nice.
I think we're at like
22?
20?
22, I think.
22?
Is
22.
Yeah, we were talking about the smell of blood.
I think you're right.
All right, but the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord. So, as we were saying in the movie, the magicians, the Old Testament, I guess, or maybe it was the Prince of Egypt. That's Joseph, right? Oh, anyhow, somebody crumpled up little berries into the water dish and turned it red,
Wait, where was this?
like the Ten Commandments or some cartoon I saw.
I don't remember that at all.
Well, then maybe it was somewhere else.
Could have been.
Maybe it was the Prince of Egypt.
Maybe.
All right. So, yeah. So my guess is that probably would not have actually convinced the Pharaoh to disregard the miracle.
Yeah, I agree. If the magicians can do something similar,
Yeah.
I can't believe that Pharaoh would have been impressed. Like this God, all he does is parlor tricks.
You know what? It's interesting. We talked about this a little last week, and of course, this is completely unrelated. But you know how they were talking about how, like, there's a theory at least that Jesus just was a magician, but he got really good,
Yeah.
and so he began to believe his own hype or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, that to me says that, now, that's not true. But what it says to me is that some of these magicians were actually pretty damn good at their job.
I agree. Yeah, they were so well known for it that people were still talking about it in the first century.
Well, then it's very possible that some of these, these are the Pharaoh's magicians. These are the best of the best.
They are the best.
So it's very possible what they did would have looked believable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is definitely the Penn and Teller of the bunch.
Uh-huh.
They're good. And I don't know any magicians.
David Copperfield.
Definitely the David, wasn't that an author?
It can be two things.
Definitely the David Copperfield.
That was the name of a book by Charles Dickens.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I didn't read it.
You should know that.
It looks long.
You haven't read it? You think like that type of reading would be mandatory for an English?
You would, actually. It's not, though.
Did you read Chaucer?
Yeah, a little bit.
Shakespeare?
It was mostly just Shakespeare, yeah.
That's it?
Well, Shakespeare's important.
Samuel Johnson?
You mean Mark Twain, right? I think that's what you mean. Wasn't that? Oh, Samuel Clemens.
Oh, Samuel Johnson.
I have no idea who that is. He was probably not that important,
He
though.
lived at the same time as Shakespeare.
Yeah, but I mean, was he Shakespeare?
He wrote the first English dictionary.
Yeah, who really knows? All right. Samuel Johnson.
You don't know Samuel?
All right.
Anyways, what were you saying?
Magicians. They're impressive.
I actually agree. I think the Egyptians probably were pretty good because like I can't replicate these tricks.
Do you think that some of the magicians were actually like getting their powers from Satan?
You know what? And now you mention it, I've heard that suggested before because it talks about their dark arts.
Yeah, it says it right there. The secret arts.
Yeah, so I don't think that to be the case, but if you believe in the New Testament, word for word being true, then you kind of have to believe that they had the ability to do sorcery. And there's even parts of the Old Testament that could lead you to believe that sorcery was real, that you can do things by the power of evil spirits.
I mean, that was proven, right? That stuff like that can happen, right?
What do you mean by?
Like there were stories of it happening in the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there are stories of this type of a thing happening in the Bible, like when the witch of Endor conjured up the spirit of Samuel. I mean, there are instances where it seems to be like the Bible is suggesting that there are, we'll say, evil powers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether or not we can tap into it, it's hard to say. But
Mm-hmm.
It's not as obvious in the Old Testament. It's more of a New Testament thing where there seems to be a heightened sense of demonic forces. In the Old Testament, it wasn't as much of a view of like witchcraft as people might think. But so all people don't realize it, but all the witchcraft in the ancient Near East wasn't much different than what the Israelites were doing. Like they weren't performing magic; they were invoking their individual gods to do something. Like if you cursed somebody because you wanted their infant to die in the womb, you weren't doing magic. It wasn't a magical curse. You would do an incantation to Lilith. Then Lilith, the deity that they believed existed, would do the thing for you. So like all of these when we think about witchcraft in the ancient world, we think about modern witchcraft where people are like putting stuff in a cauldron, and if you like say the right enchantment, magic happens. But in the ancient world, that's not the way magic happened. They believed in all these different deities and these demonic forces, and they just believed that, hey, like if you do the thing that they need you to do, then they'll perform the thing that you need them to perform. Which is why sacrifices and offerings were so important, because like if the God of your people is real, then certainly if you want the God of your people to treat your people well, you need to feed and care for the God. Yeah, I got to give them the bulls and the rams and the goats.
Yeah.
Wait, that's a long-winded answer.
I guess I thought in the Old Testament, it was just taken for granted that, yes, demons exist. So it wasn't really discussed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's the thing is like, in Christianity, a demon has a specific meaning. Like it's an evil spirit that's like working for Satan. You won't find that concept in the Old Testament. What you'll find is that there are basically like unclean spirits. And unclean spirits are just they're just spirits that are roaming the earth, and there's a dozen reasons why a spirit might be roaming the earth as opposed to being in Sheol. For example, in the ancient world, like even in ancient Greece, if your spirit was not at rest because say you were unjustifiably murdered by somebody, and you never got your justice, your murderer is still on the loose. Well, because you have an unsettled spirit because of the injustice of your death, your spirit could wander the earth. Or, for example, people who didn't receive a proper burial, it would be said that their spirit could wander the earth because they don't have a place of rest. So, like these spirits were like, there was a lot of reasons why people believe that these spirits were roaming the earth, but it wasn't because they were just evil and they were working for the devil, like the devil had minions. It's something that didn't develop until like at least the Persian period.
And that was when?
Roughly in the late 6th century, early 5th century BC. So about 1,000 years after Moses, or about 1,000 years after King David.
Oh, was that after the last book of the Old Testament was written?
I said King David. I meant Moses. Yeah, 1,000 years after Moses. He lived in 14. What were you saying?
So was that after the whole book, Old Testament was already written and sealed up and good to go?
Yeah, and that's why you see, like as you get to the later books in the Old Testament, you start to see a little bit of this idea of like evil forces, like demonic type forces. But it doesn't really appear until you get to the intertestamental literature and then like the Apocrypha, and then certainly in the New Testament, it's all over the place. So this idea that there's like this evil force in the world that is opposing God, that's not a traditional view in ancient Judaism. That's a view that develops later in history.
That's weird, interesting. Because nowadays that's
the prevailing view in Christianity,
right? Yeah.
Same thing with hell. In Judaism, even in the Talmudic period, hell was only for 12 months, for the worst of the worst. And you didn't go to hell because you didn't believe in the wrong God. You would go to hell if you were just a terrible person. So they had different classifications of people that could end up in hell. It didn't matter if you weren't a worshiper of Yahweh. Hell wasn't a punishment for thought crimes. Hell was a punishment for people who were truly wicked. Even at that, they couldn't imagine that you would spend all eternity there. Eventually you would be purged of your sin, like being refined in the fire, and then you could go on to paradise. It wasn't until the time period of the Apostle Paul that people had this weird notion that, like, just for not believing the right thing, God would torture you for all of eternity, which to me is an insane concept. I think the Catholics got this right. Catholics don't believe that, like, normal people who just don't believe because they don't, because they've never heard of Jesus or because they're unconvinced, they're not just going to go to hell for eternity. They might go to purgatory and pay for their sins and then go to and hell would be reserved for, like, really the worst of the worst. And to me, that's a more sensible solution than, like, modern Protestant Christianity, where, like, oh, you didn't believe the right thing, off to hell for eternity. That's insane.
It is.
Think about your family member. You got nieces. Is there anything that your nieces could do that you would say they should suffer eternally in hellfire for?
I mean, if they turned into, like, Hitler or something.
Yeah, exactly. They'd have to be, like, literally the worst human being to ever live.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But even me, right? I don't think there's a human being that has ever lived that should be tortured for all of eternity. When you think about how long eternity is,
it is pretty long.
Like, if you did terrible things for 75 years, sure. You persecuted people, hurt people, harmed people for 75 years. I don't care. Spend 75 years in hell. But to spend eternity suffering,
right? Yeah,
seems irrational, especially since human beings are so limited by our mental incapacities, the fact that our chemical imbalances cause us to think and behave in certain ways.
A lot of it is not really our fault.
Yeah, there's a whole, like, even people who do terrible things, a lot of times they don't even know they're doing terrible things.
Yeah.
So to say that all of eternity they should be suffering in excruciating hellfire, to me, it's a weird thought.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that one.
And I know there's probably some people on YouTube watching this right now that are, like, yelling classic, Turner Burn cliches, like, everybody deserves hell because God is perfect, holy, and just.
I hate that.
That's nonsense. That would never work. That you would never find that to be congruent with an all-loving Father. You've never met a loving Father who would be willing to send any one of his children to hell, not once. And I'm inclined to believe that if God is a loving Father, he has to be more loving than the human fathers. And I've never met a human father that would send any of their children to hell, even for a single day. To me, I think this notion of hell is invented to scare people into the religion. I think that's why it developed the way. I think initially it wasn't like.
Well, it is a good tool.
Yeah.
To round up the cattle.
I agree.
The sheeple.
How many verses do we have left to read here?
One.
One verse? Let's get her done.
7 days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. The end. That was it.
It's a weird comment, isn't it, though?
Yeah.
So the Lord struck the Nile, everything turned to blood, and then a full week transpired. What were the Hebrew people drinking?
I mean, we do find out later that they had stuff to drink, right?
Actually, in verse 24, this is really good. It says, all the Egyptians had to dig along the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink the water of the river.
Did we miss that?
Maybe, maybe.
Let's try that again. All right, so 23 and 24. Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and he did not take even this to heart. And all the Egyptians had to dig along the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink the water of the river.
Now, I got questions.
Uh,
My understanding of the water system is that if you dig in the sand underneath of the Nile, you would find water. And some of that water, if you dig deep enough, would be coming from not the river.
Okay.
And then some of it would be coming from the river. So if you're in the hyperrheic zone, that's water from the river leaching into the sand. But if you're in the limestone, like if you dig deep enough to reach the stone, that's underwater or that's subterranean water. So I'm curious to know why it was that they would be digging underneath the river for fresh water, but the blood water wasn't feeding into the fresh water.
Limestone. Were they able to do that? Dig through the limestone?
I mean, maybe they could dig. I don't know what their utensils were.
That sounds pretty deep, and sounds like you'd need like machinery.
That's what I'm saying. It seems to be like they would have been digging in the sand.
And they only had a very short amount of time, right?
7 days
before they all would have died or
So,
something, you know?
If they were digging in the sand to get the fresh water, then I'd be inclined to believe that the sand water would be contaminated as well. Just seems to. Anyways, now I'm sure this is one of those cases where I'm sure there is a logical explanation for why they were digging where they were digging. But I don't know if that explanation, like if we would need a geologist to.
Okay.
I'm not a geologist.
I don't know. I mean, what you said made sense of digging through the limestone to get water that wasn't tainted by the Nile. But you're talking about sand, so we'd have to figure out why they were digging there and why it didn't hit the Nile, right?
But it leads me to the point that you said earlier. The language seems hyperbolic. I don't think all of the water turned to blood because the Israelites had to drink something,
right?
And then on top of that, if they're able to dig and find fresh water somewhere, well, it couldn't have been water that was coming from the river unless the river itself, there were parts of it that didn't turn to blood. I don't know. A lot of questions.
And I mean, 7 days, I mean, everybody would be dead. Every single person, right?
I don't know. How long can the human live without water?
I thought it was 3 days.
Oh, I think it's longer than that, but
pretty sure it's not.
Not by month.
I'm pretty sure it's 3 days. Isn't that what they say? 3 minutes for oxygen, 3 days for water, and 30 days for food or something.
You can live.
I don't know. All right, but the first two was right.
You nailed it.
Oh, sweet.
A person can generally survive without water for about 3 days, but this can vary depending on many factors. Yeah, so it's going 7 days without water means everyone's dead.
Yeah, right.
Which means God had to have,
we didn't hear about all the Egyptians dying, right?
There's some untainted water somewhere.
Got to be a decent amount.
And it also, back to the same point too, if the Egyptian magicians also turned water into blood, there had to have been some water that wasn't blood. Right. So I'm going back. I agree with that. I think it's just hyperbolic language.
I wonder how hyperbolic it is, if it was just the Nile, or if it was not even the whole Nile, just, I mean, maybe the part right outside of the palace,
That's a good question.
I don't know.
It couldn't have been all of it, because then it would have tainted the Mediterranean. And the people living in and around the Mediterranean would have been like, WTF. Why is the Mediterranean turning red? Somebody would have wrote about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There had to be some limits
put
in place here that we're just not aware of.
Well, there's a stupid question, have there ever been stories about bloody water rivers in history?
Yep, glad you asked.
Oh, really? Okay.
There is a really interesting section of a lament. It's in Near Eastern text relating to the Old Testament. And it's on page 441. And it's an ancient Egyptian lament about disaster that had struck the land. And part of that disaster,
Egyptian.
yeah.
When was this written?
When was what written?
What you're reading?
It's not a single text.
Yeah.
It's a collection of.
So you're saying you need a little moment.
I need them. Oh. Oh, sure. All right.
I need a dedicated computer and mouse just for those, all right?
Sure. I had a note in here with that text. We could read it together.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that, and I still asked you. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting. It was all right. Here it is. On admissions of Ur. Of course it is. All right, here it is. This is the actual text. Full F. Blood. Right. So in part of the lament, it says there is squalor throughout the land. There are none indeed whose clothes are white in these times. Indeed, the land turns around as does potter's wheel. The robber is a possessor of riches, and the rich man has become a plunderer. Indeed, trusty servants are blank. The poor man complains, how terrible. What am I to do? Indeed, the river is blood, yet men drink of it. Men shrink from human beings, thirst after water. Indeed, gates and columns and walls are burnt up, while the hall of the palace stands firm. And there's a whole list of laments about terrible things that are happening in Egypt.
That's interesting.
This is the admonitions of if you were. And ironically enough, you're never going to guess what time period this was written. Shortly after Moses theoretically would have lived. It's like within 100 years or so of what the Bible says Moses would have lived, which means there could have been an actual like naturalistic event that that is the start of this mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe because at the same time period, if you read the Amarna tablets, there were plagues. There were a bubonic plague that broke out in Egypt that was so strong it even made it up to the Hittite territory.
So what you're saying that the Jews co-opted this for their own narrative?
Well, what I'm saying is that there was an actual plague that
Yeah.
happened in Egypt that it probably did include the waters turning to blood and people getting sick
Mm-hmm.
and covered in boils, and but some of these plagues are for show. They're not all real. There was a cataclysmic event that happened at the time of Moses. And then further storytelling arose out of it. It might have started out with only 4 plagues, and then people added more plagues to embellish the story, much like the story of Tel El Hammam, where there seems to be an air blast that destroyed the city that we discussed could have been the reason why the Sodom and Gomorrah narrative was told.
Hmm.
It was a justification for the history. So
Right.
the Exodus event could have been a real event, or the plagues could have been a real event, and then later people wrote a story explaining why this event happened.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's funny you should say it like that because when you're telling me about this, I go, oh, this is proof that it did happen.
Yeah, but see, what I'm suggesting is that natural phenomenon happened, that we can prove happened in history,
Yeah.
and then people came behind that and added mythology around it.
Right.
You
Because they
know,
didn't know how to explain it scientifically, right?
because they didn't know how to exactly because they didn't know how to. So when we read about the plagues in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
rather than suggesting that there's all these naturalistic phenomenon to account for it that we have no evidence of, I think it's more likely that there was naturalistic phenomenon, but not exactly the way the Bible tells you it happened. It's a mythological telling of the events.
What do you think we'll be able to determine which of the plagues are real?
I think we could have some clues. Like we've
Okay.
already seen in the ancient world people complaining about water turning to blood, although it probably wasn't real blood. People are complaining about famine and boils. And if the water is getting people sick, guess what? The frogs are coming up out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so there's a cascade effect
Yeah,
here.
so it's possible that wasn't its own plague.
Yeah, and if people are getting boils,
Yeah.
that could very well be tied to the bubonic plague, and we know that the bubonic plague broke out in ancient Egypt, so much so that even the King Mursili II in the Hittite territory was complaining about it. Because when the Egyptians and the Hittites went to war with each other, that's how it spread from the Egyptians to the Hittites.
Mm.
And because they don't know how germ theory works, they just assumed that their god was cursing them. So
Crazy.
there is naturalistic phenomenon that kind of undergird the mythology,
Mm-hmm.
but when I read it as there's like a kernel of truth and then a whole envelope of mythology around.
Uh-huh.
Whereas a biblical literist would say, no, it's just all literally true. But if that's your position, that's a very difficult position to hold.
I think the truth is somewhere in the
I agree. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. There are people who say all of it's fiction. I don't agree. I don't think all of it's fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is some truth to be had here. The question is, where does history stop and mythology start? There's clearly some gray area there. It's fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got to say about that.
Wait.
Do we want to add anything before it?
You want to just...
We only spent 2 whole hours on one chapter.
Yeah, but I thought it was going to be shorter, so
So you want to go to 11 and do chapter 8?
Well, I thought it was going to be shorter, so I spoke more. So if I known it was going to be so long, I wouldn't have said so much.
I know we do this every week.
Yeah.
We always think that we're going to get like multiple chapters done, and then
There was one week where we actually finished at 8:30.
I think
So now I'm like, never again.
they must have been tiny chapters. We were so confident that we were going to get through both chapters.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. One day, a man can dream.
Can dream.
Yeah, but we had 16 hours at least.
That's pretty good.
Might be a record for us.
That's pretty sad.
It's hard to believe somebody's here listening.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, we're having fun.
Well, I will just say thank you to my sister.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. We're having fun, so we hope you're having fun. But we'll be back again at it next Monday on chapter 8, apparently. We'll have the same background.
And maybe 9.
I mean, we'll see.
Not though.
I mean, if history is a guide,
Uh-huh.
I think we know what's going to happen.
I wrote a lot of notes for chapter 9 too.
We're going to dig in.
Chapter 8.
I mean, maybe I'll just quit my job so we can do this.
Why not? I don't.
We're going to need more than 6.
Well, okay. You just need to donate a lot of money.
We'll see what happens.
All right, guys. Have a good time at your life.
We will see you in a week with chapter 8, and if you pray hard enough, chapter 9 as well.
Yeah, so keep praying.